In a traditional large estate, a large room had its original doors open to connect two rooms. Here, about 20 people were eagerly waiting for the food to be served. In the pond, the fish were watching the people. Today is my nephew's birthday party. Relatives have gathered to celebrate my nephew's occasion. Today's menu is pasta, at my nephew Alex's request. For some reason, my mother-in-law decided that she would bring the pasta herself after having Jessica, my sister-in-law, and I carry the other dishes. After a while, my mother-in-law placed the pasta in front of me. Knowing I dislike pasta, she deliberately served it heaped. Moreover, the pasta sauce looked darker than everyone else's. My mother-in-law smirked maliciously. Just then, luckily, a delivery arrived. My mother-in-law had ordered some gourmet food online. She happily went to the entrance. Now's my chance. I took the plate of pasta to the kitchen and returned half of it to the pot. Then I hurried back to the table. After a while, my mother-in-law came back, looked at my plate, and seemed to sense something was off. My nephew was engrossed in his pasta. More, please. I'll go get it. The mother-in-law said nothing. My nephew enjoyed his second serving of pasta. Suddenly, after gulping down the pasta, Alex started to feel unwell and spat out the pasta. Ugh. What's wrong, Alex? The mother-in-law turned pale, yelling. Why did Alex eat it? It's because Brooke didn't eat quickly. Hearing this, my legs trembled. Perhaps something had been mixed into that unusually dark pasta. A fierce anger welled up within me. I swore to find evidence and someday avenge myself against my mother-in-law. I am Brooke, a 29-year-old junior high school teacher in my hometown. Soon to have 30 milestones. I met my husband, Peter, when he came to pick up his sister, a classmate of mine, at a high school reunion when I was 24. Peter, then 31 and 7 years my senior, appeared very calm. I was drawn to his gentle and easygoing nature, which felt somewhat similar to mine. Peter seemed to find me charming and cute, and we quickly hit it off, meeting frequently and eventually dating. Peter worked at a hotel in the next town, often working night shifts, leading to an irregular lifestyle. Peter, a laid-back and somewhat sloppy person, had no interest in living alone and stayed with his parents. I also lived with my parents, so I was unfamiliar with household chores and busy with work every day. We both wanted to settle down soon. So about 6 months into our relationship, we decided to get married. When we visited Peter's house to announce our engagement, his mother served us a homemade meal. Both his mother and father seemed to like me. After greeting both sets of parents, we were set to marry. One day, when I visited my in-laws after a long time, my mother-in-law said something surprising. Hey, Brooke. Have you thought about having children? She asked out of the blue. Surprised, I responded honestly. Children? We've just gotten married and haven't thought that far ahead yet. Hearing this, my mother-in-law frowned slightly. Oh, is that so? Maybe someday, I guess. I see. The mother-in-law seemed a bit disappointed. Then she suggested something shocking. Hey, Brooke, how about you live with us? Live together? Even if you're not thinking about children now, you might eventually, right? If you live with us, you won't need to quit your job when that happens. I'll take care of the household chores. I can see my grandchildren every day. And it'll brighten up the house. It's all good, isn't it? Let's live together. Peter's house was a traditional large estate with a small pond in the garden, which had been renovated to modern standards, ensuring privacy even if we lived together. After some thought, considering the private space and the possibility of letting children play in the garden, I agreed to move in. The arrangements were made quickly, and we started living with my in-laws. Living with my in-laws was more comfortable than I had expected, and we were enjoying a happy newlywed life. However, we faced a significant issue 3 years into our marriage. We still hadn't been able to have children. I'm home. When I returned home, Peter, who had been at home all day, appeared from the back. "Brooke, my mom suggested we visit a fertility clinic for a checkup. What do you think?" "Yes, that's fine. I've been concerned about it too." Seeing this as a good opportunity, we took a taxi to a well-known fertility clinic on a Saturday morning when Peter had the day off. What if they say I can't have children? While feeling anxious, I hesitantly asked my husband, Peter, "Well, if it comes to that, we should give up regardless of who is the cause. Of course, I hope we are blessed with a child, but I'm not obsessed with the idea. As long as I'm with Brooke, that's enough for me." Understanding my anxious look, Peter said this, held my hand, and smiled warmly at me. "Right. Thank you. I feel the same way." Hearing my husband's words, we both felt relieved that neither of us was fixated on having children. After the consultation, the doctor told us, "You both are still young, so there is plenty of possibility. However, women can quickly become of advanced maternal age, making it gradually more difficult to conceive. Starting infertility treatments early can increase your chances of becoming pregnant. But the decision is up to you too." We weren't in a rush for children, but the thought of quickly becoming of advanced maternal age was complex. The ride home was silent. There is a good chance of pregnancy, but to leverage that chance, it might be better to undergo infertility treatment. Neither of us was desperate for a child. Considering our busy daily work schedules, the time required for clinic visits was a concern. Plus, I am still young. Should we really start treatment right away? Or should we wait for a better time? I was deep in thought. After returning home from the hospital, Peter reported the results to his mother. "So, that's how it is. Brooke, you'll of course go through with the treatment, right? Don't worry about the money," she said immediately. Her statement was a bit confusing. It's tough balancing work, so we thought about leaving it to nature for a bit longer." "What are you saying? If you don't start soon, you'll be of advanced maternal age and it'll become even harder to have children. Why don't you quit your job and start treatment?" "Quit my job?" Honestly, I had never considered that. Sure, there are days when the students won't listen, and I feel like giving up due to the workload. But I love my job. The faces of my students flashed before my eyes. I can't quit my job. I love my current job, and the students are important to me. I answered her firmly, but she looked at me wide-eyed in surprise and said, "I can't believe it." "Why?" "Children are necessary, aren't they? Of course, we'd be happy to have children. But neither Peter nor I are focusing that much on having children right now." "I see. All right then," she replied, clearly displeased. From that day, her behavior towards me changed. She continued to persuade me to undergo infertility treatment every day. One day she brought a hospital pamphlet, saying, "How about this hospital? It's run by a female doctor who will surely take good care of you." Or when I had a drink after work, she'd say, "Brooke, you shouldn't drink alcohol if you're trying to conceive. Be careful about what you put into your body." The more she persuaded me, the more I felt forced, and I said, "Please, enough. Peter and I will discuss our child's matter. Please leave us alone for now," in a firmer tone than usual. However, this made her attitude towards me grow colder. She barely spoke to me or avoided eye contact when I tried to speak to her. Once, I overheard her on the phone with a friend, blatantly speaking ill of me, saying, "Is your daughter-in-law also troublesome? But, compared to mine, she's nothing. Mine doesn't do anything. She can barely make pancakes. She has a hearty appetite though, a real good-for-nothing." It was a terrible way to be spoken about. I heard this from behind a cupboard. My mother-in-law, who was kind and gentle when I first married, was now enjoying gossiping about me with her friends. The thought of being treated like this until we had a child made me tear up. About a week later, I offered, "Mother, let me help with breakfast." I had offered before, and she had smiled, saying, "You're busy with work, Brooke. Don't worry about it. Just show me my grandchild's face soon." But this time was different. Finally decided to help, have you? "Well, let's start tomorrow then." I had offered before. I thought, but swallowed my anger. I forced a smile and said, "Leave it to me. However, I come home late every day, so I'll have to leave dinner to you." "Of course, I'll make dinner." The next morning, I woke up an hour early to prepare breakfast with my mother-in-law. But she didn't come out of her room. Wondering what was going on but not wanting to be late for work, I decided to start cooking on my own. I made soup, omelet, and grilled sausage, and set the table. Then, my father-in-law came in. "Brooke, what are you doing?" "Good morning. I've decided to start helping with the cooking from today." He seemed a bit surprised but kindly said, "Is that so? Thank you. Take care not to overdo it." His kind words warmed my heart. Finally, my mother-in-law appeared. "Brooke, were you able to prepare the meal by yourself?" "Yes. I'm not great at cooking, but I did my best today. My husband, Peter, was on a night shift and hadn't come home yet. So, the three of us started eating. When my mother-in-law tasted the soup I made, she frowned and coughed. "What's this soup? Is something wrong? Did you put any herb salt in this?" "Yes, I used one I bought from a website which showed a positive review." Suddenly irritated, my mother-in-law said, "This soup is bland and not delicious at all. We grow herbs and stock handmade ones in the refrigerator. What have you been looking at all this time?" I was at a loss for words. Father-in-law tried to smooth things over. "Well, this has its own good taste, doesn't it?" But she snapped at him, "You stay out of this." The air went silent, and we all quietly finished our meal without further conversation. This sort of exchange became a daily occurrence. I sighed deeply and thought, this again today. But the attacks from my mother-in-law didn't stop there. One day, I came home late from overtime to find that dinner wasn't prepared, which was unusual. "What? Why?" Confused and standing still, I was startled when someone spoke from behind me. "Brooke." It was my mother-in-law. "Hey, you startled me. I didn't realize you were there." With a serious face, she said, "From now on, you will prepare dinner." "What do you mean?" I stand there, bewildered and at a loss for words. "You're Peter's wife, aren't you? It was wrong of me to have been cooking all this time." "That's true." She wasn't wrong to say that. But it was quite sudden. Especially since she had insisted on doing it herself before we lived together. "This is quite sudden. I often work late, and by the time I get home, it might end up being store-bought or convenience meals." "Is that all right? Peter comes home late at night anyway." "Yes, but then you'll have time after work before Peter gets home." "Don't be lazy." Her point was valid. Thinking that in most households dinner is prepared after work, I found myself unable to say anything. I shouldn't have said anything that day to ignite this situation. I guess I'll have to eat out when Peter isn't home. Deciding to take a positive approach, I stopped worrying about pleasing my mother-in-law and felt lighter about it. My brighter demeanor seemed to annoy her, as she began to ignore me and even gave me cold looks when I left for work, unaware of her gaze. Today is November 25th, Thanksgiving Day, and also the 9th birthday of my nephew, Alex, Jessica's son. The family gathered included my mother-in-law, father-in-law, Jessica, and her child. Jessica has been raising Alex as a single mother since her husband passed away. She is a classmate who introduced me to my husband. Then, Peter's cousin Eric and his family of 4, along with my parents, also came. My husband, Peter, had taken the day off a month in advance for this occasion. Today's menu was pasta carbonara, Alex's favorite and my least favorite dish. Jessica and I were in charge of preparing the pasta, and my mother-in-law was unusually in a good mood. "You two relax, I'll take care of the rest." It was rare for her to take over the cooking. I found it unusual since she had been leaving everything to me recently, but I didn't mind it much. After enjoying some video games with Alex for a while, we heard my mother-in-law's voice from the kitchen saying, "It's ready." Jessica and I headed to the kitchen. "Could you two carry these over, please?" Jessica took the appetizer plates, and when I started to serve the pasta, my mother-in-law insisted, "I'll do that. You two handle the drinks." So, we carried out the dishes as instructed. Everyone was eagerly anticipating the meal, their eyes sparkling with excitement as they exclaimed, "Wow, this looks delicious." Then, my mother-in-law brought the pasta to the dining table. She approached my seat and said, "This is yours," placing a plate of pasta in front of me. I hadn't noticed the creepy, thin smile she wore at that moment. The pasta in front of me was piled high and its sauce was an unnaturally dark color. The sight of this unfamiliar color of pasta made me feel slightly nauseous. Just then, the doorbell rang. Oh, that was quick. It seemed a delivery person had brought some mail-order gourmet food. My mother-in-law hurried to the entrance, delighted. "Now's my chance." I took my plate of pasta back to the kitchen and returned about half of it to the pot. I then took the lighter plate back to the table. My father-in-law and I made eye contact for a moment. Worried I'd been caught, I hastily said, "I'm on a diet, so I reduced the amount a bit." He laughed and said, "You don't look like you need to diet." After a while, my mother-in-law returned and stared at my plate. I was anxious she might notice something was off, but it seemed she didn't. Alex is a big boy and loves wrestling. He quickly finished his first serving. "Seconds, please." "Oh my, you do eat a lot. Pasta is my favorite," Alex said, opening his mouth wide for his second serving. Then suddenly spat it out, beginning to writhe in pain. Jessica hurried over to him, asking, "What's wrong, Alex?" My husband immediately called an ambulance. "Alex! Alex!" Jessica called out beside him, with my mother-in-law gaping in shock. Why did Alex eat it? Frustrated and repeatedly exclaiming. Her words made me realize she had added something to my pasta. This is terrible. My legs were shaking. It seemed Alex had eaten the pasta I had returned to the pot. This explained my mother-in-law's unusual behavior today. Jessica and Alex were taken away in the ambulance. Since we didn't have a car, Peter and I, along with my father-in-law, decided to follow in a taxi. Peter sat in the front, while my father-in-law and I sat in the back. But my mother-in-law was taking her time coming out. Mom's taking forever. What's she doing at a time like this? A thought struck me. Peter, I'll go get your mom. I tiptoed towards the kitchen. As I got closer, I heard rustling noises. Peeking around the corner from the hallway to the kitchen, I recoiled in shock. There was my mother-in-law, furiously washing the pasta pot with an incredibly fierce expression. Her stance was wide, and she seemed to be steaming from the head, not looking like herself at all. It was as if she had revealed her true form, similar to a mountain witch. The pasta was gone, likely forced down the toilet or the drain. Even as Alex was rushed away in such a state, she was desperately trying to cover up the evidence. I was too frightened to speak to her, and my legs wouldn't move to go back. Meow. Suddenly, a cat cried outside, startling me. This is bad. My mother-in-law and I made eye contact. Realizing I was there, she tried to act nonchalant. Though, Brooke, I was just tidying up a bit before we go. Is that so? Trying to hide my trembling hands, I pretended to be calm. Let's go. I noticed her hands were shaking too. You took so long. Yes, I had to clean up a bit to avoid the smell sticking to the walls. Knowing full well that leaving a pasta pot out wouldn't make the walls smell. I was scared thinking about what might happen next. We're here. We arrived at the hospital after about 15 minutes. It was a large general hospital, and the time was around 7 p.m. We entered through the emergency entrance and were guided to the ICU by a security guard. A nurse, who looked slightly younger than me, approached us. Are you Alex's family? Yes, we are. Please wait here for a moment. We were led to a nearby bench. There were 3 black vinyl sofas arranged in a C shape, each able to seat about 4 people. Where's Jessica? She must be with Alex. When I looked at my mother-in-law, her eyes were darting around nervously, clearly acting strangely. After about 10 minutes, Jessica came over with a pained expression. Jessica, how's Alex? He's just finished his examination, and they're currently washing out his stomach. So the pasta was the cause, then? For a moment, I felt my father-in-law glance at me sideways. If the pasta was indeed tampered with, would he suspect me? However, I had no motive. Or, if one were to be fabricated, it could be that a childless daughter-in-law, jealous of her sister-in-law's child, attempted murder. If that were the case, my mother-in-law's motive to harm me would be much stronger. What should I do? No. This isn't the time to worry. Pull yourself together, Brooke. I told myself sternly. Then, Jessica muttered, it's similar to what happened to him. I turned to Jessica in shock. Who do you mean? Tom, my late husband. I remembered hearing from my mother-in-law that Tom had died of cancer. Did he pass away in this hospital? No, not here. It was S hospital. It's the symptoms that are similar. It wasn't cancer. We never talked much about Tom's situation in the family, so I never asked for more details. No, it wasn't. What do you mean? The stew had sulfuric acid in it. What do you mean? That day was Alex's kindergarten sports festival. We had dinner at the family home in the evening. His second favorite after pasta was cream stew. But only his stew had it. How could that happen? Doesn't it just not add up? That's why no one talked about it. Was there something in today's pasta? Could such a thing happen again? I looked at my mother-in-law. She was staring at the wall, appearing to hold back something. She must be trying not to show any disturbance. Was Tom's work going well? Actually, about half a year before the incident, his company went bankrupt. Since then, he was just home, sleeping every day. I see. After that, it was just unemployment benefits. He never said anything about what he planned to do next. That's when you started working, Jessica. You had some arguments with Mom about it. With this statement from my father-in-law, I was convinced that Tom was done by my mother-in-law. After a while, the nurse from earlier came over. Please follow me. We proceeded to the consultation room. An older doctor turned around and said, You can rest easy. Alex has been saved. Everyone cried out in joy and relief. I saw that my mother-in-law was crying too. She must be relieved that Alex didn't die. Sulfuric acid was detected in his stomach. Everyone had a look of realization. My mother-in-law was looking down. I took a decisive step and asked my mother-in-law, "Do you know something about this?" Everyone was shocked by my question. "Brooke, that can't be." My husband stopped me from pursuing it further. My mother-in-law was staring at me with dead eyes. Later, the whole family was called in for questioning by the police. I couldn't forgive the fact that I was almost killed. Desperate for revenge against my mother-in-law, I figured out a plan to spread rumors around town. I decided to talk about the incident to my students, spreading rumors. The next day, I told my middle school students about the incident. "Hey, what do you all think? It has to be her, right?" The students were intrigued by the story, and it seemed they talked about it at home. Because of this, rumors started circulating in the neighborhood that my mother-in-law was the culprit, and she began to be looked at with suspicion whenever she went outside. Just as planned. One day, when my mother-in-law went to her favorite flower shop, the moment the shopkeeper saw her, he shut the shutter, not allowing her inside. It felt as if even the neighborhood cats would run away from her. As days went by, my mother-in-law seemed to start worrying even when sparrows flew away from her. She was visibly stressed. She became visibly more haggard due to the stress. A month later, Alex was discharged from the hospital and back to his lively self. In contrast, my mother-in-law aged significantly in a month. Often seen smiling faintly to herself, as if her mind was affected. A Sunday, the doorbell rang. Peeking through the peephole, I saw two stern-looking middle-aged men in suits, with several police officers wearing gloves behind them. Could it be? And opened the door. One of the men in suits showed me a badge from his chest pocket. "We're from the police." I had seen this scene on TV many times. They were detectives. The other person in a suit spoke. "It's been tough with the recent incident, hasn't it?" "Yes. We're here for a house search today." "Right now?" "We need to take a look around your house." We wanted to do this sooner, but it took some time to get the warrant. At that moment, the uniformed police officers entered the house all at once. My father-in-law and husband had gone out to play golf. My mother-in-law was sitting in the back room, watching TV in a formal seated position. After a while, there was a commotion in the kitchen. "This might be it," someone said, and the kitchen became noisy. I headed to the kitchen and was shocked at what I saw. In the hands of a police officer was a plastic bag containing a battery acid refill, about 20 inches long. "Where did you find this?" "We decided to check under the floorboard here." The officer pointed to a floor storage near the back door, a place where my mother-in-law usually stores pickles. It's usually filled with pots, so the floorboard isn't visible. Underneath the removed floorboard, damp soil was visible. "So this is the source of the sulfuric acid." Upon hearing this, my mother-in-law appeared from the back room. Eek. Suddenly, she let out a strange shriek and then fainted. "Ma'am, we'll need to ask you to come to the station for further questioning." My mother-in-law readily admitted to her actions. She was also the culprit behind Tom's incident. She had obtained the battery acid refill from a local home center. Later, a psychiatric evaluation revealed she had a mental disorder, and she was admitted to a mental hospital. 2 years later, it was decided that my mother-in-law would be discharged. She had become a completely different person, much kinder than before. It seems she had been suffering from a mental disorder since around the time of Tom's incident. Still on probation, the rumors in the neighborhood persisted. But my mother-in-law was deeply remorseful and always said, Brooke, I'm sorry for what happened back then, repeatedly. 3 years have passed since then, and I've turned 32. Our family still lives in the same house. About 3 months ago, my husband and I were blessed with a child. Today, we found out at the hospital that it's going to be a girl. The middle school where I've been working for many years will be consolidated with another next year. And I was supposed to transfer to a middle school in the next town. However, I've decided to become a full-time homemaker and dedicate myself to raising our child.